Why Hitler hated the Jews. The dark truth behind his obsession. How does the hatred of a single individual become the policy of an entire state? How does a private obsession grow powerful enough to reshape laws, mobilize millions, and ultimately erase entire civilizations? These questions are not rhetorical, nor are they abstract. They sit at the center of one of the darkest transformations in modern history. Adolf Hitler's hatred of the Jews did not emerge suddenly, and it did not begin with violence. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, with ideas that circulated long before he ever rose to power. Ideas repeated until they felt familiar, familiar until they felt reasonable, reasonable until they felt inevitable. The Holocaust did not begin with camps, deportations, or killing. It began with language, with stories told again and again until they no longer sounded extreme, with explanations that promised clarity in a world that felt confusing and unstable. It began at the moment when complexity became unbearable and simple answers became seductive, when fear demanded certainty, and certainty was provided in the form of blame. Understanding this process is deeply uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because it reveals something disturbing about how destruction unfolds. It does not always emerge from chaos, rage, or sudden collapse. Often, it grows out of order, out of systems, out of rules that appear logical and justified at the time. Genocide does not require constant violence at the beginning. It requires normalization. This is not merely a story about one man's psychology or personal hatred. It is a story about how individual resentment can merge with cultural myths that already exist in society, about how fear can be organized into ideology, and how ideology, once accepted, can be enforced through the machinery of a modern state. Hitler did not invent antisemitism. He inherited it from centuries of European prejudice. He absorbed it, simplified it, and elevated it into a total explanation for everything that felt wrong in his life and in his nation. What follows is not an attempt to shock, excuse, or sensationalize. It is an attempt to understand the mechanism, because history does not repeat itself exactly, but it often follows familiar paths. And the path that led from private frustration to industrialized murder was paved slowly, deliberately, step by step, long before the world fully understood where it was going. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in a small Austrian town into an unremarkable family far removed from power or influence. His father was rigid, authoritarian, and emotionally distant, a man who valued discipline and obedience above imagination. His mother, by contrast, was gentle and deeply protective, the emotional anchor of Hitler's early life. This contrast shaped him profoundly. Authority felt oppressive, while approval and affection felt rare and precious. As a student, Hitler showed little discipline or consistency. He struggled with structured learning and authority, yet he developed strong artistic ambitions. He imagined himself as a painter, a creator, someone destined for recognition and significance. Art represented more than a career. It represented escape from mediocrity and from a future defined by routine, hierarchy, and submission. That dream collapsed in Vienna. After his mother's death from cancer, a loss that left him emotionally unmoored, Hitler applied to the Academy of Fine Arts. He was rejected. He applied again and was rejected again. The judgment was clear and unambiguous. He lacked the ability to depict human figures. He was not revolutionary, not exceptional. For Hitler, this verdict was devastating. It was not merely professional failure. It was a blow to his identity. Vienna became the place where his world narrowed. He lived in poverty, selling hand-painted postcards, sleeping in shelters, sharing space with the unemployed, the displaced, and the forgotten. His daily existence shrank to survival. At the same time, Vienna was a city charged with political and social tension. Nationalism surged. Fear of modernization and cultural change filled public life. Antisemitism was not hidden or marginal. It was visible, vocal, and politically effective. Hitler absorbed this atmosphere intensely. He read constantly, but selectively, gravitating toward conspiracy theories and racial pseudoscience that offered simple explanations for his frustration and failure. Crucially, his resentment was not fueled by personal mistreatment from Jews. In fact, individual Jews treated him with kindness, including the Jewish doctor who cared for his mother. This matters because it reveals something essential. His hatred was not personal, it was ideological. Jews became symbols rather than people. They became a convenient explanation for failure that did not require self-reflection. Antisemitism offered Hitler a narrative in which he was not inadequate, but obstructed, not limited, but sabotaged. This psychological shift from self-doubt to external blame would shape everything that followed. The First World War marked a decisive transformation in Hitler's inner world. When war broke out in 1914, he volunteered immediately and was accepted into the German army. For a man who had spent years drifting in isolation and failure, the war offered something he had never truly known before: belonging. For the first time, he felt part of a collective mission greater than himself. The rigid structure of military life gave him clarity. Orders were clear. Roles were defined. The confusion and ambiguity of civilian life disappeared behind hierarchy and discipline. The war reduced existence to something simple and absolute. There was an enemy, there was loyalty, there was purpose. For Hitler, this simplicity was not oppressive, it was comforting. He served as a regimental messenger on the Western Front, a role that required him to move between positions under constant artillery fire. It was dangerous, but danger gave meaning to his life. Fellow soldiers described him as disciplined, reserved, and intensely obedient. He did not form close friendships, but he devoted himself completely to duty. During the war, he was decorated twice for bravery, including a high military honor recommended by a Jewish officer. This detail is crucial. It shows that Hitler's hatred was not born from personal mistreatment or betrayal. Even here, reality did not match his later ideology. When Germany surrendered in November 1918, that sense of meaning collapsed overnight. Hitler was hospitalized at the time, temporarily blinded by a gas attack, when he received the news. He later described the moment as devastating. He could not accept that Germany had been defeated. In his mind, the nation had not lost the war. It had been betrayed. Like many veterans, Hitler embraced the stab-in-the-back myth, which claimed that internal enemies had sabotaged Germany from within. Socialists, communists, and especially Jews were blamed for the nation's humiliation. The myth was false, but it was emotionally irresistible. It turned defeat into injustice and transformed rage into moral certainty. Hitler absorbed this narrative completely. From this point on, anti-Semitism was no longer a background influence in his thinking. It became the foundation of his identity. Loss was no longer accidental. It was inflicted, and if it was inflicted, then someone had to pay. After the war, Hitler entered politics almost by accident. He was assigned by the army to attend political meetings and report on radical groups. One evening in Munich, he rose to speak during a debate, and something unexpected happened. His voice carried anger, certainty, and absolute conviction. The room fell silent, then erupted. For the first time, he realized that he could command attention, not through careful reasoning or evidence, but through emotion. That discovery changed everything. From that moment on, Hitler refined his style relentlessly. He learned to speak in short, forceful phrases. He repeated ideas until they embedded themselves in the listener's mind. He escalated emotion gradually, beginning calmly and ending in fury. Most importantly, he always named enemies. He understood instinctively that crowds do not want complexity. They want coherence. They want the world reduced to something they can grasp. Antisemitism provided that coherence. Jews were blamed for capitalism's excesses and for communist revolution, for cultural decay and economic hardship. The contradictions did not weaken the message. They strengthened it. The explanation was elastic enough to absorb every grievance. No matter the problem, the answer remained the same. After a failed coup attempt in 1923, Hitler learned a lesson that would define his rise. Power would not be seized through violence alone. It would be taken legally from within the system. Democracy would be used against itself. Hatred would no longer shout from the margins. It would be normalized through law, bureaucracy, and routine. This is the mechanism that matters most. Extremism becomes unstoppable not when it screams, but when it institutionalizes, when it appears orderly, when it enters classrooms, courtrooms, and offices, when it regulates professions, controls language, and defines identity through paperwork. What followed was not chaos or impulsive rage. It was deliberate strategy. And that strategy would soon reshape an entire nation. The Great Depression gave Hitler the opening he had been waiting for. Economic collapse shattered what little faith remained in democratic institutions. Banks failed, unemployment spread, and millions of ordinary Germans watched their savings and futures disappear almost overnight. Fear replaced patience. Desperation replaced restraint. In moments like this, people do not search for nuance or complex explanations. They search for meaning. They search for someone to blame. Hitler offered both, and he offered them with absolute certainty. He did not speak about global economic systems or structural weakness. He named enemies. He told people their suffering was not accidental, not random, and not deserved. It had been inflicted. Someone had done this to them. That message cut through confusion and fear with brutal simplicity, and it worked. Once in power, the transformation of Germany was swift but deceptively orderly. Civil liberties were suspended through emergency decrees. Opposition parties were dissolved or silenced. The machinery of the state was aligned around loyalty. What made this transformation so dangerous was that it did not feel like chaos. It felt procedural, legal, almost routine. Jewish businesses were boycotted. Jewish professionals were removed from public service, universities, courts, and media. Step by step, Jews were pushed out of economic and social life. Propaganda saturated daily existence. Newspapers, films, classrooms, and radio repeated the same message until lies became background noise and cruelty felt normal. The Nuremberg laws formalized this exclusion. Jews were stripped of citizenship and reduced to subjects defined by ancestry rather than rights. Identity became a matter of paperwork. Dehumanization became administrative. Violence escalated openly during Kristallnacht, when synagogues were destroyed and thousands were arrested, but by then, the moral groundwork had already been laid. Years of propaganda had prepared society to see violence as justified, even necessary. War removed the final restraints. Ghettos were established. Communities were isolated, starved, and dismantled. Mass killings began and were soon systematized. Murder was organized, scheduled, and managed. This was not an outbreak of madness. It was policy, executed with bureaucratic precision, By the end of the war, nearly 6 million Jews were dead. Entire cultures, languages, and histories vanished. The world was forced to confront a terrifying truth. Genocide had not been carried out by chaos or disorder, but by planning, obedience, and organization.